awesome folks. I hope you're all well. I thought I'd take a moment to record a video about the HSP216 case analysis, which is I think your first assignment for HSP216 policing and governance. As per with all of the little videos that I do, you'll find these slides above me and you'll be able to click along as you go through it. But I like these shitty little graphics that kind of tell a story about what you have to do. So, in this instance, don't be a cat, but you do have to do some internet Googling to find yourself a case of misconduct or corruption of police. Pretty simple. Then you need to do a bit of research in the library databases and Google Scholar. And then you need to analyse the case in terms of the research that you find in this particular instance. And then you need to write it up as a kind of an essay format. So the due date is on the Milo site for you as always. It's a 1,500 words maximum, but that excludes the reference list as usual. And it's weighted at 40% of your overall grade for this particular unit. Now, you need to find a particular case of police misconduct or corruption, depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it. And you need to analyse this case in terms of what you've learned about in the unit. So it could be a couple of major key concepts that you've learned about, and you need to pull those out of this particular case and then talk about it in relation to the literature and the ideas from the unit. The example you use can be fictional or real, and it can be from anywhere around the world and can be found in any media format that you want. So it might be a novel that you've read, a film, a TV show, a song, a news article, or on this slide here I've got a book by a quite famous police officer, Colin Dillon, who stepped out as the key whistleblower with the Fitzgerald inquiry in Queensland a while ago. So yes, you need to make sure you're drawing on your set readings, Google Scholar, all of that sort of jazz. And have a look at the marking rubric to see exactly the types of things that we're looking for. So what I'm going to get you to do is follow these simple steps. You use Google to search for an example of a case of police corruption or misconduct, that something that hasn't gone down very well. And this could be anything. It could even be a play if you wanted to. Then you find some research about police misconduct and corruption. What does it say to do, and what does it say to avoid, for instance? And then you analyse your case of police corruption or misconduct that you've got there, and you've got to look at what went wrong, right? Pick 2 or 3 main points, make the links in your paragraph between parts of your example and your research literature, and remembering all of the stuff that we've talked about. So was it a breach of a code of conduct, for example? And that is something that we talk about in the unit. Was it a performance management issue where the KPIs that the organisation have set are too high and they're unrealistic? And then you can link it to that research. So these are the types of things that you need to think about. Then you write up your case analysis as a mini essay in a Word document, pretty easy, with a reference list. You write up your reference list using Harvard style, and you upload your finished assignment to the assignment submission folder on Milo. Very easy. Now I have a suggested structure as always because I love structure. So you start your case analysis with an introduction, obviously, talking through what the case study is about, briefly note where it came from. Then you formulate a thesis statement. What are you arguing that this particular element went so wrong, right? Or this element and that element and the other element might be 2 or 3 things that you're focusing on. And you just quickly outline that in your introduction. The officer used coercion in their questioning. The second officer hit the person with a phone book, whatever it is. Then you describe the case study in further detail, about 200 words. That's fairly easy. Then you need to talk about how policing went wrong, right? Because obviously it's been classified as corrupt or misconduct in some way. So you need to focus on that type of stuff. And this is the way that I suggest you do it. You've got one key point in the first bit. For example, the officer used coercion in questioning a suspect. You explain your key point about how the policing went wrong. Then you explain what the research says about how policing went wrong. Then say what the research says about how it should have been managed, right? So that it's clear to the reader that you're making a particular case about this. Then you go into point 2, which is pretty much the same thing again, which is where, the officer hit the person with the phone book, which is a case of misconduct as well. Explain your key point, explain what the research says, and explain what the research says about how it should have been managed in that particular situation in terms of human rights or whatever it might be. Then you have your conclusion and your recommendation about, this is very clearly a case of police corruption because, recommend further action if that's the case. And then you have your references. Pretty simple stuff. Equally simple is the marking rubric, where we want, again, looking at a clear discussion of theoretical knowledge, a detailed discussion of the case, having a nice conversation in there somewhere about key terms and making sure you're drawing on the literature. Then you need to look at your issue and the way that you've clearly demonstrated and balanced and justified argument around what's going on there and making sure that that's evident throughout. And making sure you've got high quality evidence to support what you're discussing. Then you need to look at your grammar, spelling, expression, and so forth. Consistent use of Harvard with an above average number of high quality references used. So if you want an HD, that's what you need to focus on. As per usual, I've got this little outline about how to write an essay. It's very simple. It's just there as a reminder for you to think about those things. But I also have another example from another unit where we've got really nice work. I've used just a couple of example different paragraphs. This is just one out of the general analysis. And you can see how this person's linked in research literature to support their particular points. Then we've got a good example of an introduction there for you too. And you can see how they talk about, firstly, I will talk about this, then I will discuss this, finally I'll discuss that. And then there's a good example of a conclusion there for you too, so that you can see how they've summarised their main points and then made a recommendation about how to move forward. So that just gives you a sense, and that example is up online for you as well. So it's pretty straightforward for you to follow. Anyway, on that note, that is the conclusion of my video on the case analysis. If you have any questions, as usual, just get in touch with me and we can have a chat. I hope you have a great week and I'll see you all soon. Bye!